Daniel Lewis Lee's name appears again and again in some of the most disturbing crime cases in U.S. history. He was not a misguided man who made a single bad decision. He was a devoted white supremacist whose violence escalated over time. His crimes included murder, bombings, and acts of extreme cruelty, a path that ultimately led to his execution by the federal government. This story examines his life, his crimes, the legal process that followed, and even his final meal. Lee was raised in a deeply abusive household. His stepfather repeatedly beat him, and from a young age Lee struggled with ADHD and substance abuse, including inhalants and drugs. He was later diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. His behavior became so dangerous that his own mother frequently contacted police, even reporting him for assaulting his stepsister, who had cerebral palsy. Despite these warnings, authorities repeatedly sent him back into the same violent home environment. In 1988, at just 15 years old, Lee had his first serious encounters with law enforcement in Oklahoma County. Within days, he was arrested twice for burglary and arson. 4 months later, he was charged again, this time with 3 counts of second-degree burglary and threatening a witness. In early 1989, he was expelled from a psychiatric facility in Miami, Oklahoma after assaulting and intimidating other patients. That same year, he escaped custody twice, prompting officials to transfer him across state lines to Kentucky and later Arkansas. During this period, Lee began associating with members of the Ku Klux Klan. He claimed to see a father figure in a KKK veteran named Bobby Norman, a relationship that introduced him to organized white supremacist ideology and Nazi symbolism. By the summer of 1990, when Lee was still only 17, he was involved in his first killing in Oklahoma City. At a party, Lee assaulted 22-year-old Joseph Joey Roth III, beating him and placing him in handcuffs. With help from his cousin, John David Patton, they dragged Ra to a storm drain, forced him to undress, and made him crawl inside. While Lee disposed of the clothing, Patton slit Ra's throat and stabbed him repeatedly. Lee later testified against his cousin and accepted a plea deal. The murder charge was dropped, and Lee received a 5-year suspended sentence for robbery. Patton, however, was sentenced to life in prison without parole. As Lee entered adulthood, he fully embraced the white supremacist movement, particularly in the Pacific Northwest. He became known for his aggressive behavior and prominent white power tattoos, including a swastika on his neck. In early 1995, Lee was arrested in Bowling Green, Kentucky for assaulting his girlfriend, Jennifer Given. The incident reportedly began after she destroyed a photograph of Adolf Hitler that Lee owned. Given later described a relationship marked by constant violence, even during her pregnancy. Before April 1996, Lee lost his left eye during a bar fight in Spokane, Washington, reportedly after shouting racist insults at a Native American man. He refused to wear an eye patch and eventually adopted the nickname Cyclops within neo-Nazi circles. Around this time, Lee met Chavai Kehoe, a white supremacist determined to establish a white-only homeland in the Pacific Northwest. Kehoe followed Christian identity beliefs and had created a group called the Aryan People's Republic. Lee's reputation, violent tendencies, tattoos, and missing eye made him a natural fit. The group funded its activities through robberies, kidnappings, murders, and weapons trafficking. In January 1996, Lee and Kehoe traveled from Washington to Arkansas. On January 11th, they arrived at the home of William Frederick Mueller, a gun dealer known to keep large sums of cash and firearms. Kehoe had previously robbed the same home and believed more valuables remained. Disguised as a tactical police unit, they attempted entry while the family was away. When the Muellers returned, Lee and Kehoe restrained William, his wife Nancy, and later questioned 8-year-old Sarah Elizabeth Powell, Nance's daughter, using a cattle prod to intimidate her. They ultimately stole around $50,000 in cash, gold worth over $100,000 today, and approximately $30,000 in guns and parts. Afterward, they stunned all 3 victims and suffocated them with plastic bags sealed with tape. The bodies were later transported more than 70 kilometers to the Illinois River, weighed down with rocks, and dumped into the water. Lee received between $3,000 and $4,000 and a handgun for his role. The bodies were discovered months later in June 1996. On April 29, 1996, Lee placed a nail-filled pipe bomb constructed by Kehoe at Spokane's historic City Hall. The explosion shattered a window and scattered debris across 2 blocks but caused no injuries. Kehoe's brother later stated the bombing was intended to spread chaos and advance their white separatist goals. Kehoe was arrested in June 1997 in Utah after a confrontation with police. Lee returned to Oklahoma, briefly working in El Reno before federal authorities began monitoring him. On September 24, 1997, a joint task force arrested Lee at his mother's home in Yukon. While awaiting trial in Polk County, Arkansas, Lee assaulted other inmates and later attempted to plan an escape using a weapon hidden inside a modified radio. Lee was indicted in December 1997, and his joint federal trial with Kehoe began in November 1998. The murders were prosecuted federally because they were committed in support of a criminal organization. Prosecutors sought the death penalty for both men. Although Kehoe received life without parole, the Department of Justice ordered prosecutors to continue pursuing execution for Lee. At trial, the prosecution presented extensive evidence of Lee's violent past, including assaults on family members and his teenage killing. The defense cited his abusive upbringing as mitigation, but the jury was persuaded by his long pattern of violence. On May 4, 1999, Lee was convicted on 3 counts of murder, and 10 days later, the jury sentenced him to death. Lee spent 21 years on federal death row in Teote, Indiana, filing repeated appeals. After exhausting his legal options in 2017, his execution was delayed due to a federal moratorium. That changed in 2019 when executions resumed. Notably, the victim's family opposed his execution, with Nancy Mueller's mother stating it would not honor her daughter's memory. Daniel Lewis Lee was executed on July 14, 2020, at 7:36 a.m. During the procedure, he denied responsibility, claiming innocence. He was given 2 doses of pentobarbital, and at 8:07 a.m., he was pronounced dead. The curtain was closed, ending a case defined by extreme violence, white supremacist ideology, and a deeply controversial execution.